There was one time in my first area. This is where there was a really nice place on one side of the freeway, and then there was the freeway, and then the train tracks, and then there was this place called Tamina that's it's like the first Freeman settlement in Texas. And so there are a lot of African American people, and there's just a lot of poverty. And so we had an investigator down there. Her name was Margaret, and it was honestly super humbling to go to her house. It was, we would go and talk to her, and we'd sit on the porch because her son's bed was the couch and he was still asleep. And we got invited inside one time. There weren't any doors. It was just kind of sheets in the doorway. And just to see, I mean, they really didn't have very much, but she was such a kind lady. So we had an appointment with her. We were just waiting. We were a little bit early, so we were just sitting in our car. And all of a sudden we heard this, "Hey!" and a whistle, and I turned around, and I'm pretty sure it was adrenaline, but this giant black man was walking toward us. I mean, he was huge, and he was bulky, and oh my heavens. So my companion rolled the window down. It was my trainer, so she had to deal with it. She was like, "Hello?" He was like, "What are y'all doing here?" And she was like, we have an appointment down the street." And he was like, "Y'all aren't selling or buying dope, are you?" And we were like, "No, sir, we're not." And he was like, "Well, the kids always park in front of my house to buy dope, and I'm sick of it. I was going to call the cops on you." We were like, No, we're not buying dope. I promise. It's, so I just remember the conversation ended genially, and he was like, "Well, have a nice day," and walked away. My companion was like, "I'm pretty sure I just wet myself. That was so scary." So yeah, that's a crazy experience that is G-rated that I can share. I almost learned how to ride a bike without hands. I didn't, though. My first companion, when we were biking, I was better than she was. And then my next companion got transferred in. She was this daredevil. So she, is riding without hands, going all across the road, like up on the curb. I felt really bad about that. I was very upset. I have lost it a little bit, but I'm trying to get it back. I have gotten very good at saying yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, and no, ma'am, and no, sir, because kids will get smacked if they don't do that. They are always very kind. That was one of my favorite things about being down in the inner city, is that these giant black men with many tattoos and piercings and gold teeth that you thought were the most frightening things in the world would always say yes, ma'am. So, I mean, they were always so very kind. And that's one thing that I loved about, there's definitely an African-American culture down there that I miss so much. I did not get a Texas accent, but I can speak Ebonics. I'm losing it a little bit, but you know that girl. I be talking. And there were people that were just hilarious. They were so fun to talk to. But you kind of get a little bit into that groove, and you're going to miss it if you're from Utah, because there's no black people here. But they were just so kind. But they are very, very polite. I very rarely had anybody that was super rude to me down in that area, which was really interesting. I loved being down in the inner city. I loved talking to people down there. It was hard because a lot of the times we'd go and teach them, and then we'd come back and they'd be totally high, and so we couldn't teach them anymore because they were high. But they were so fun to talk to, and so you kind of get into that groove. So you get the yes ma'am and the yes sirs. The y'alls are fun. People didn't use them a lot around me because, again, I was in the city, but I really wanted those, so I worked on them. They say you have to eat everything. I wasn't very good at that because I hate tomatoes with a fiery, burning passion, and also onions. And so members were not very, they were usually very, if you don't want to eat this, please don't eat it, because they knew. One thing that always really worked for me is take your dishes to the sink after you're done, because there was a member that really liked that and told the mission president, and members always were really impressed. So take your dishes at the sink. There's just funny things like fixin' to. Well, it's not really fixin' to, it's fixin' to. I'm fixin' to do something. And just funny Southern isms that were great. It's just a funny place. There's little quirky things. There's not really anything big, but there's little quirky things you get a lot. So there was this one family that I taught that was so wonderful and so great. So we had just gotten transferred to this area. They had taken this elders out and put the sisters in, and we were looking through their area book, and we found this family that they had taught, and they had started teaching them, and they were open to them having missionaries over, but they had just had a baby, and it was the youngest of 7 kids. So they were like, oh, well, just try them back later. So we started teaching this family, and it was amazing. They were so great. But it was also really hard. They always talk about families, and it's amazing to be able to teach a family. But one thing that I didn't even think of is that it's 5 different investigators that may be at 5 different places. So the dad did not talk. We could barely get him to say words. And most of the time it was just nodding or one-word answers, which was really hard to figure out how somebody's testimony is if they're giving you one-word answers. I remember one time he asked my companion and I if we were doing something for the weekend, and we literally stopped for a second because we were so surprised that he had asked us a question, and then we were like, oh, we're not doing anything. We're just being missionaries for the weekend. It was great. But I remember we'd been teaching them for a while. They had gone through all of the lessons, and we felt like they needed to be baptized, but we still didn't know what page this dad was on. The son had been going to church and going to activities. The family had been going to church, but because he never said anything, we really had no idea where they were supposed to be. So I remember we were planning this baptism, and we just sat there and we were like, I don't know if we can set a date, because what if they're not ready by this date? What if, they haven't gone to church enough times because they have to go these times in order to go? And my companion and I just said, you know what? I think she said it. And she said, you know what? We just have to let it go. We just have to trust that we're going to set this goal and Heavenly Father's going to make it happen. And if it's not supposed to happen, it's not going to happen. So we set this date and we said, this is when it's going to happen and it's going to be great. So we did their interviews. We called the mission president in to help us do interviews because we had no idea how to read this guy. Actually, we asked him about it. He was like, well, I'll come and do it, because he's just like that and he's great. And he said, yep, they're ready to go. And so they were baptized. And they, I got transferred right after that, but they were able to go to the temple. My companion said that when they received the priesthood, that they ordained the dad, and he turned right around and ordained his sons, which was totally, it's so cool. They got transferred. That's a missionary thing. They moved up to Illinois, and the dad is now in the young men's presidency, and just all these different things that I never would have expected. And that was a lesson to me, because I worry so much. It's what if I don't get this to happen? What if this doesn't happen? And it was really cool when I came home, because it translated really well. Some things are hard to translate into real life, but I just remember, I was trying to get a shift covered at work, which normally, it's such a little thing, but normally would have stressed me out. But because of that learning to just be okay and know that it's all going to work out, I was able to be totally okay with it. And it's really cool. I love that. It's like one of my favorite things.